Hello guys, Tops here. Today I wanna explain to you, to my best capabilities, how FEARSOME works. Because I was wrong in the past and I made a video about FEARSOME. I will delete that video. If you see that, I've already deleted it. Where I did the wrong math about FEARSOME. So FEARSOME. FEARSOME is a tier 7 perk. This is Turtle's YouTube guide, Turtle's Steam guide about the perks, the best guide you will ever find about Battle Bros. I will try to link that down in the comments, in the description, right? Alright, so how does FEARSOME work is the topic of today. So any attack that inflicts at least 1 point of damage to hit points triggers a moral check for the opponent as opposed to only above 15 points of damage. Also applies minus 20% of the attacker's resolve, minus 10 as a penalty to the defender's resolve of damage calculations. And see, that was where I was wrong. I did the math wrong. The correct math is minus 10 in damage-based morale calculation. So that means if you have 60 resolve, it does minus 10, so your 60 resolve counts as 50 resolve. And that was where I was wrong. I thought it is the 60 resolve, so 60 minus 10. And that's not right. So basically it's 60, it is 60, wait, that was wrong again. So it would be, if it's 60, 20% of that would be 15, minus 10 would be 5, right? So that was my thought. But in reality is 60 minus 10, so it applies for the 50, and 20% of the 50 will be, which is 10, right? So you have a penalty of minus 10 resolve when you attack with FEARSOME, if you have 60 resolve, right? As you can read here, right? So that's the formula. Sorry, it's a little bit complicated. I explained it badly, but that's basically the formula how it works. You take your resolve, subtract 10 from that, and then 20% of that is the multiplier that you apply to your opponent. So if you have 60 resolve minus 10, 50 resolve for the FEARSOME, 20% of that will be applied to the opponent, which is 10. So minus 10 resolve for your opponents for the morale check. All right. So, Turtle says dropping any morale is good, that's true. And allows for additional morale checks, that's true. And yeah, then we have that one and that one. And this is basically it. So we have the FEARSOME, the formula is chance modifier resolve, as you can see here. Example, right, there's another thing, like if an opponent drops in hit points, the lower the hit points, the more likely it is that he will fail the resolve check. So there's an example here with a 200 HP Orc Warrior. He was 75 resolve and no modifier. He takes 10 hit point damage, and then you can see with FEARSOME it significantly increases the chance, especially for Orc Warriors. And Orcs are, relatively speaking, they are very susceptible to stuff like FEARSOME. Not because they have terrible resolve, like 75 resolve for an Orc Warrior, that's not low, but they have so many hit points that you hit them a lot. And at some point, especially the lower the hit points get, the more likely it is that you apply, that they will drop in resolve, right? So they go from steady to like wavering, then breaking, then fleeing, right? These are the 3 steps. In each of these steps is minus 10% to all of your stats, basically. That's why it is so strong and why moral is so important and why confident is such a nice buff. All right, FEARSOME penalty caps at 110 resolve, which is minus 20 penalty to the opponent's resolve. So the 75% at the 75 resolve Orc Warrior would have 55 resolve if he gets hit with a FEARSOME weapon that has 100, and the brother who hits him has 110 resolve, right? So you can see Ancient Dead have these ones, Fallen Heroes have these ones. Death Wish makes you immune to FEARSOME, and now the funny interactions, like the three-headed flail, only the first attack can use the 1 to 14 effect. And yeah, as you guys know, it is really hard to do hit point damage with the three-headed flail. So the fearsome flail is not as good as you might think. And yeah, that's kind of the thing. Only that's consistent. Like only the first attack applies the good effect of fearsome, which is the 1 to 14 damage. You only have to do 1 hit point damage in order to trigger a moral check. Normally you have to do 15 hit points. Yeah, and as you can see, that only works for the first thing. And on Splitman, the Great Axe attack, only the first attack will do 1 to 14, but the second effect can trigger it as long as it does 15 or more hit point damage, right? Spear Wall can only proc once per enemy turn, even if they walk into the Spear Wall multiple times. Really interesting. So the Spear Wall fearsome is not as awesome as you might think, although my personal findings with fearsome has been like, fearsome is a gamble. So you're basically gambling that your opponent fails a moral check. And depending on his resolve, that's likely or not likely. And the more bites you get at the apple, the more likely it is that he drops a moral. So if you have anything that has AoE, is always good in combination with fearsome. So like something like the gun, sword lance, great swords, hammer, you know, the AoE attacks, and something like spear walls where you have multiple attacks per turn, technically, right? So like an opponent can walk into you as long as he wants. So like you can check one guy for like 4 or 5 times, and at that point, even if you gamble at a low chance, if you do it like 4 or 5 times per turn or something, eventually you will drop your opponent's moral, right? Eventually. All right, what I didn't know, right, it says right here, each AoE attack can proc fearsome. The lightning sword does proc fearsome as well, which is kind of funny. The 1 to 14 damage does not apply, but all 15 plus procs will do fearsome. Interesting. Ancient undeads are immune, of course. Enemies are technically immune. Minimum drop chance to moral is 5%, right? There's a basic 5% chance in the mechanic in the game, so you always have a 5% chance of succeeding or 5% chance of losing. So basically you always have a 5% chance of dropping a moral check. That's why like a lone wolf tank in Black Monolith who was like 100 plus resolve can drop in moral if he gets hit often enough, because at some point, you know, the 5% will be hit. So 1 out of 20 times your tank will fail a moral check if he gets hit or if he gets stepped on his field. All right, and then it goes on. Fearsome got nerfed twice. Yeah, as you can see, is nerf the formula 20 minus resolve instead of 20 with 20% minus 2% chance, less drop chance. Okay. So it got slightly nerfed, and then we go on fearsome continued, and it basically says, yeah, fearsome increases the chance that you drop your opponent's moral significantly, right? And it's a good debuff because if an opponent like drops a moral, he basically loses 10% of all of his stats. 10% of his melee attack, range attack, melee defense, range defense, and of his moral, which makes it more likely that he will lose the next moral check as well, because he loses 10% of his moral as well. All right, so yeah, downside of fearsome, moral checks will occur naturally when you hit and your opponents and you kill them. You will proc moral checks as well, and undeads, for instance, are completely immune, which is a downside to fearsome. Okay, so it basically says compounding value, more fearsome users better. Okay, so like again, the concept, the more times I try to proc a moral check, the more likely it is that it actually will happen. So if my whole team has fearsome, it is more likely to break my opponents and maybe even chain route them, right? So that's kind of what you want. Break your opponents earlier than you would normally do by attacking and killing them. And then we have some use cases. So the dagger puncture with the 3 attacks, right? Or the Katal duelist. Again, like high attack counts in combination with fearsome, always nice. The handgun up to 6 targets for checks. We have I made a video about the gunner build. This sounds, this is really nice. Like if you have like 3 gunners and you can fearsome check, like every hit has a chance to proc fearsome. So it makes it more likely. Like if you have 3 gunners and everybody shoots once, we have like 18 times the chance that, or 18 opponents potentially have to make a moral check, and they, or like even if you check on a 5% chance, like if you have 18 chances, like there's a high chance that one of your opponents will drop a moral check. All right, 3-headed flail up to 6 chances again, but only the first one can use the good thing about fearsome, which is only 1 to 14 damage. 14 damage has to be applied. All right, AoE attacks, of course, more targets, more checks. That was basically what I was saying, like stuff like War Size, Grey Swords, you know, AoE stuff to proc more attacks. One-handed and two-handed cleavers, because you attack twice per turn, or potentially 3 times with Berserk. Two-handed X split man, you have 2 checks per turn, but only the first one can benefit from the good thing. The Warhammer, 10 HP minimum damage, so you guaranteed proc this basically, no matter how high the armor of an opponent is. I found this to be relatively consistent with my Warhammer build. The problem is, I don't know. This seems to be like maybe an early game build. I don't know. It feels like it doesn't do that much. But it's like if you have a bro who is like low melee defense, you can try to give him a shield and a one-handed hammer, and the one-handed hammer does on a hit at least 10 HP damage, so you will guaranteed proc fearsome, which you otherwise wouldn't proc a moral check. So this build is relatively consistent in proccing moral checks, but it is very low damage. But it is a debuff build, and the one-handed hammer shield guy doesn't do much damage, so fearsome helps that out. Warbow, debuffed range. I did this a couple runs ago, maybe like 10 runs ago or something, and we had fearsome on our warbows. Yeah, like it's really nasty if you can shoot down like marksman and stuff. Like it also makes it more likely that you hit with a bow, because it reduces, like if an opponent drops to like very moral, it's minus 10% range defense, so it's more likely if you hit your first shot and you drop your opponent's moral that your second shot will land. So that felt kind of nice. And you can kind of, debuff your opponents. Sometimes even make them flee, even if they're not dead. All right, shield bros. Fearsome gives them support utility. That was what I was talking about, the Warhammer shield build, where you basically have a low damage brother that can proc moral checks and therefore add utility. Spear wall, the damage is usually too weak, and I think that's the point. You can only use the 1 to 14 check once, right? So only on the first attack the 1 to 14 thing will appear, and then you have to make 15 hit point damage or more in order to trigger this, and that is versus anything that has like high armor. Unlikely, right? Or even low armor, like the spear with spear wall. You have to imagine spear wall does reduce damage, and the spear is already a low damage weapon. So, yeah, the fearsome spear wall, I don't know, like versus unarmored opponents, good. Versus armored opponents, probably not that good. You're probably gambling. But if like multiple opponents step into your spear wall a lot, you might trigger a fearsome proc. All right, Fortified Mind, of course, increases your fearsome. The more resolve you have, the more penalty you apply, up to a maximum of minus 20. As said here, Bannerman should have 1 plus resolve, so the Bannerman can do the minus 20 max penalty, I have found that Fearsome on a Bannerman is a nice pickup to increase his utility in battles. Alright, it's strong in the arena because you encounter elite enemies. If you get them all to drop, that has huge impact. Orcs most vulnerable to Fearsome. Yeah, and here like you hit orcs a lot, so and like the Zerkers and the Youngs have low armor or no armor, so it's likely that you proc a lot of checks on them. And the more checks you proc, the better Fearsome is. Anti-Nimble, yeah, basically Nimble reduces hit point damage, so it's harder to deal 15 hit point damage to Nimble, but if you have to deal only 1 damage, you can apply Fearsome. So Fearsome as a Nimble counter, yeah, but we have to say that basically no opponents in the game have Nimble except for like Southern armies and maybe like one mercenary assassin or something, like very elite guys that you basically never encounter, and you can completely avoid to fight Southern armies. In most runs you don't have to, so like, but it is a counter to them for sure. Barbarians, they have a lot of resolve. Yeah, and then it goes on some misconceptions, some tricks. I don't know what that is, but yeah. All right, so that is how Fearsome works. Again, the formula was in the beginning. It applies a debuff, 20% of your resolve minus 10 of your resolve. That is the debuff that you do to your opponent. And if you have Fearsome, it is more likely that you moral check your opponent. That is how Fearsome works, basically. Again, I will link the turtle guide, and if you want to have a deeper look into that, I highly recommend reading that, because I can't really explain that well, but you can read it for yourself, and then you might get a better understanding of how all perks work in the game, by the way. All right. Yeah, this is it for how Fearsome works. Yeah, strong debuff perk. And yeah, this is it, guys. By the way, I have a Discord. I stream daily, so you can watch me there. You can join the Discord. And thank you so much for watching, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe. I will see you in the next one. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.